Also da Tomatilya azu salam jini sinsi nangengi.
First of all, I would like to extend my warm greetings to all of my Dharma friends, male and female, who are listening over the internet. Now, actually, I was supposed to teach yesterday, but I was unable to teach yesterday. And so today I will teach this. So actually, before that, I hadn't slept well. So I was only able to sleep like 5 or 6 hours. And these days, I've been having trouble sleeping recently, and now it's like my voice has no power. You probably, now this teaching is just like we're always changing. So you think that I'm probably just doing, whatever I'd like. But I've just been too busy. I've got too much work to do. So I've got the preparations for the teachings and many other things to do. Too much work. That is why we've been having so many changes. And so I'd like to beg all of your pardon for this. Yesterday was Bokhar Yantse Rinpoche's birthday, so I'd like to take this opportunity to wish Bokhar Yantse Rinpoche happy birthday, and I hope that his life and his activity flourish. And in particular, I hope that those who serve Rinpoche, in particular Kyabje Bokhar Rinpoche, Kyabje Khenpo Rinpoche, and all his other attendants, all of the Changta and everyone. I'd like to say thank you to all of you, in particular to Rinpoche's father and mother and relatives. I'd like to also extend my greetings to all of you. So today, what I'd like to speak about today is generally, actually, I'm supposed to continue on the autobiographical verses, good deeds. I would have come to the 31st good deeds, but instead of that, but during the 30th discussion of the 30th good deed, we discussed how Mikyo Dorje had founded so many monasteries in his life, and particularly monastic colleges, both those for philosophy and also for Tantra. And in terms of financial support for that, Mikyo Dorje himself did what he could. He sponsored them himself. Now, when we say that Mikyo Dorje sponsored them, we think that means that he actually gave it with his own hands, but it doesn't necessarily mean exactly that. Basically, at the time that he built the monasteries and the monastic colleges and so forth, there was a person who offered the land. Generally someone who offered the place, and they offered the place and the facilities for it. And when you needed to build a monastery in the location, they'd have to spend money, and the person who did that was generally there was a person who sponsored it, but even if there wasn't, it was sponsored by the good encampment. Now, just building a monastery is enough. You also have to have someone who's taking care of the monks. And you need someone who has a little bit of power, can think about like the king or the lord of that region or the king of that region would support the monastery. As I said before, the Zhang king, the king of Zhang had said that every year he would send 500 monks. As I said yesterday, it's similar to that. So you need someone who's going to send monks to the monastery. So for this reason, building a monastery, and in particular building a monastic college, requires many different internal and external conditions to come together. And only when you have the temple, the statues, and so forth, and then also the community, the Sangha within it. And so one thing we need to pay some attention to right now is the Mykhyö Dorje was different than the previous Karmapas in terms of primarily building philosophical colleges and taking so much interest in that. And so during his lifetime, the philosophical colleges spread very wide, or flourished greatly. And when I think about the reasons why he took such interest in philosophical colleges, I think there are primarily two different reasons why. And so if I can show this to all of you. No, these are two different reasons. Now, the first of these two reasons is Mykhyö Dorje's own way of thinking. In particular, he was the one who initiated this, and so there's a question of how he thought about it. And so it's important for us to understand this. Now, the second reason is how it was seen by other schools. This is the thing about other schools or other people, how they see it. And so these are these two different aspects that we should examine this. Now, first of all, I'll speak first about Mykhyö Dorje's own way of thinking. Now, one thing that we need to understand first is the first Kajupa, that is the Tapo Kaju, a monastic college for philosophy, when was that founded? That was founded in the 14th century by Taisitu Chatra Rinpoche. It's a monastic college of Tsetan. And so he founded the monastic college of Tsetan. This is probably the first philosophical college in the Tapo Kaju. And later, if I have the time and the opportunity, then I will speak about it, but I don't need to say more today. Within the practice lineage of the Karma Kamsan, the first person to establish a monastic college was the seventh Karmapa, Chödrö Gyatso. Now, when he was when seventh Karmapa Chödrö Gyatso wrote about the reasons for establishing a set of forest philosophy, this means primarily for interest of the studies. This is written. He wrote about this in his own charter for the Chupchen monastery. I think this is actually, I believe that this is from the charter for the Chupchen monastery. And so that's why I've put at the top that it's from that charter for the Chupchen monastery. Now, I think it's okay for him to speak at the meetings. I don't need to recite every word. So people who study often have little interest in those who practice or little respect for them. And for many reasons, they'll disparage them and criticize them. And those who practice have no interest in study, and they're always criticizing people who engage in studies. But the teachings of the Buddha depend upon scripture, both scripture and practice. And so this is a way that might just completely destroy the Buddha's teachings without a teaching. And so when the practitioners don't like the people who study and the people who study don't like the practitioners, this is just a way that will destroy the teachings, that there's none left. And this is an intolerable situation. I mean, Chuddhajassa couldn't bear the situation, so he established the Shedra for the monastic college for the philosophy. This is primarily practicing the studies on the common sciences and Buddhism and the scriptures of the three Bhaktis based on it. But if you study these according to the Tibetan texts, the Tibetans have so many different ways of talking. If you accept one, then you're conflicting with another. And then it becomes a basis for feeling more attachments and aversions. So for that reason, he emphasized primarily the Indian texts and the Indian commentaries. Now, if there are no Indian commentaries, then Chuddhajassa himself wrote a commentary for those. And so firstly, he entered the Shedra and did the study, and then after you finished that, then you would make practice the essence. And so that is the primary way that procedure that he established. So in brief, when Chuddhajassa established the first Karmakaju monastic college for the philosophy, then the main reason was so that the teachings of the Buddha consist of both scripture and realization. And in order to spread them, you need to have both the practices of teaching and practice. And if the teachings of teaching and practice are separated from each other, then that's not. You must practice, study and practice in union. That's one reason. Now, the reason is that if you teach according to the Tibetan texts, because of the different explanations by Tibetan masters, then it's quite possible that it'll increase sectarianism. And so for that reason, we should primarily teach according to the Indian texts. So because of this, when Chuddhajassa first established the Kamsang Monastic College, from one perspective, I think he wanted to have the teaching and practice both to be equal in the contribution. Prior to that, the practice had been emphasized, but so he wanted the practice study to be equal. Likewise, because there are so many different views into schools, he's trying to think about ways to prevent from becoming into conflict. And so that's the feeling I get. In any case, within the Karma Kamsang, the first person to establish a monastic college for the study of philosophy was the seventh Karma Pamitrabuddha. And one of his students was the Karma Trinepa. And he founded the Leksheling Shedra, the Leksheling Shedra in Nyugla. Now, there are many very well-known scholars who came out of the Leksheling Monastic College. One of them was the Dakpo Tashi Namgyal, the lineage holder of Gampo. The second was Paulo Tsotrungwa. Paulo Tsotrungwa also had stayed at Leksheling and engaged in studies there, it is said. So basically, the seventh Karma Chuddhajassa not only founded the first Kagyu monastic college, but his students also had a great influence and benefit for the study and practice in the Kagyu tradition, including one of them, there's Kama Chinipa. And later, Drupal Pema Kagyu also within the Drupal Kagyu established a Shedra. But at the time that he established it, then there were a few students in the Drupal Kagyu monasteries who didn't understand the reasons for studying them. And what they said is that you're going to change the Drupal Kagyu lineage. It wasn't like that before. Now you're changing it. And so they criticized him for it. And this is described in Kunchen Pema Karpo's biographies. And there's a lot about it, but I don't need to speak about it today. And so in this way, within the Karma Kamsan lineage, the first person who initiated this shudder was Chudachatso, and the person who continued this was Karma Chinlepa, the one who really increased the shudders and improved the teachings of study, and who spread them very widely was the 8th Karmapa Mikyo Dorje. Now, the reason why he took such a great interest in study is described in the charter that he wrote for the Gatsa Kama Shunluk Ling. There is the temporary charter for the Gatsa Kama Shunluk Ling when it was within the encampment. So this is one of the more important shudders founded by Mikyo Dorje. In the beginning, in the very beginning, the Gazakashama Shamaling was within the Kamgachin, and then later it settled down in one place, and it became the Gatsakama Shunling. First it was in the Gachen, and it traveled with the encampment. And later it settled permanently in one place, and that became the Gazakama Shunling. Now, the Gatsakama Shunling had this charter, the temporary charters. Now, I don't need to read all of this, but the main point is that it says is that, to talk about the main points of this, but the main point is that during the early parts of the lives of the previous comers, they studied the 3 trainings, and they spent all their time in remote places. And this way, the teaching, the practice lineage flourished without any stains. But later, the essence of the Buddhism, the teachings of the Tapo Kagyu, have weakened. And in actuality, the individuals who have the karmic fortune to be able to enter the teachings and practice Mahamudra are growing fewer and fewer. But there are also many intellectuals people who think that they want to examine things logically, and there are more and more such people. And so for this reason, so there are many external, internal people inside and outside the Kagyu lineage who have many misunderstandings and misconceptions. And so for this reason, the 7th Karmapa Chudachatso wrote long commentaries on the tradition of Dharmic dynasties, he wrote the Ocean of Literature on Object, which explains the commentary on validity and other texts on validity. And then his own greatest disciple, Karma Chinlepa, continued to benefit teachers in a similar manner by the emphasizing teachings of study. And Mikdorje said, I am also that master, Karma Chinlepa's disciple. And so this I have tried to benefit beings with working with philosophical texts. And for those who study them, I've provided them with a livelihood. And in order for providing the livelihood to become meaningful, I have built these monastic colleges. And so that's the main point, basically. Likewise, Mikyo Dorje also wrote an autobiography that he wrote at Namche Mountain. This is an autobiography, and what he said in this is, I think it's okay to just read this. The seventh Karmapa Gyan, Karmapa said, in this life I've not accomplished the study of a single verse of sutra. So for fools such as him to say that in his next life he would study and teach is to rouse courage. In the time I was 18, I established Shedda, and when I was 27, I held a college for 20 to study sutras. Then on, I taught as much as I could the Dharma Sutra and teachings to match the minds of the members of the Sangha. So here there are two different manuscripts, and there's a slight difference in the number of the words. So the meaning is the same, but they're different. But the meaning is actually the same. But the main point here is what it's saying is that during the first part of the seventh Karmapa's life, he was able to establish a Shedra. In fact, he wrote he wrote commentaries on the Ocean of Libertarian Logic, and also a commentary on the Prajna Paramita, the Lamp of the Three Worlds. But he was not actually able to study and teach the sutras himself, and so he made the promise that in the future he would study and teach the sutras. And so this is a promise or a commitment that he made. And in order to fulfill that commitment, Mikyo Dorje, when he was at the age of 27, he started a monastic college. And once he had started this monastic college, he gave many teachings on Sutra and Tantra to the students, basically endless teachings to his students. And so from one perspective, he established the Shedra, the monastic college, and he had to teach this. And the second point is that he also, because the seventh Karmapa Chudajasa had this own intention, he wanted to fulfill that. And so this is what he says. So, Karmapa Mikyo had given many teachings on the sutras and tantras, and there are many who are studies which have become Rabjampas or like PhDs who had finished their studies. Now, how we know this is that there is a list of accomplishments by Mikyo Dorje, and what it says in this list of accomplishments is, to say that it's the main point, that previously in the country, there are few people called Rabjampas. This means people who have completed their studies of this. It's like these days, like we have like a Rabjampa certificate. If you go to the big monastic colleges, they have they have Geshe Larampa and so forth. It's similar. At that time, we have Rabjampas. This was there weren't very many Rabjampas in the Kamakaju before that. But these days, in all of the Kamakaju monasteries, this probably means I think the Karmapas monasteries, or I don't think it just means a particular separate Karmapa. I think it means that it's talking about all of the old and new Shedras established by the Shedras. He said among the students who had completed their studies of the center and come to the completion of these studies, and who had at least over 50 students who had these Rabjampa, who achieved this level of accomplishment, he says. And in particular, another thing that we need to pay attention to is that Karmapa Mikyo Dorje not only founded monastic colleges for the philosophy and study of sutras, he also founded several different Tantra colleges, places where you could study the topics of the Tantras. He established quite a few of these. And within these, they really spread the teachings on the explanations of Tantra as well as the practice of Tantra. And what he says in his list of accomplishments, previously the practice of Tantra was not so complicated, but these days, whether we're talking about the practice colleges and the Tantra colleges, there's a lot of study of Chakra Samvara, Guhya Samaja, Vajra, Bhaira, Vasarva Vidra, Yamantaka, Mahakalaja, Sagara, Vajravara, Yoga, and Kala Chakra. And so there's There are new traditions of even new and better traditions of study of the mandalas, the dance, and the geometries and of the mandalas and so forth. And so I have established this new tradition. So if we want to sort of summarize this, later within Tibetan Buddhism, we talked about the distinctions of study and practice were divided into two parts. You had those who upheld the lineage of study and those who upheld the lineage of practice. So it's divided in these two parts. For example, like the Sakya and the Gelugpa are like the transmissions of the lineage of study. The Sakya and Gelugpa are primarily transmissions of the lineage of study. The Kaji and the Nyingma are primarily practice lineages. This is what's commonly said. This is what is commonly said. But if we look at the actual history, among the Sakya and Gelug, there were quite a few great scholars, but there are also many great siddhas. If you look at the history, this is very clear. However, when you talk about the transmission of the tradition of the lineage of study and practice, it's basically a distinction of the degree of emphasis. The practice lineage primarily emphasized the teachings of practice, and the teaching and the transmission of study primarily emphasizes teaching study. There's a difference of emphasis and a degree of emphasis, but it's not to say that the Shedapas who had no interest in practice, or that those who were interested in practice were not interested in study. I think if you thought so, it'd be a great mistake. And this is, I think, this is also what all the great masters of the past. It's a great mistake, actually. And the reason why I'd be so terribly mistaken is, as the Acharya Vasubandhu said, the teacher's true dharma is twofold. In essence, scripture and realization, these are upheld only by those who teach them and accomplish them. And so what this is saying is that the teachings of the Buddha is combined in the two parts of the teachings of scripture and the teachings of realization. In order to spread the teachings of scripture, what you need to do is to teach it. In order to develop realization, you need within your being, you have to practice. And so these two cannot be separated. They're the same importance. They're equally important. Because the study is not so important, but only practice is important. Or only practice, or practice is not important, only study is practice. It's not like that. Well, when you do when there's a Dharma activity or World One, there's a sequence of steps. What you have to do first, and then what you do later. There's a sequence. Like when you're making food, in order to make food, first you need to know how to cook. You need to know how to cook. And after you know how to cook, then you need to buy all the ingredients for what you're going to make. Then you need to actually cook the food. Similarly, in order to practice, you need to know how to practice. And if you don't know how to do the practice, you are not able to do the practice. So for that reason, there's just a difference in sequence, a difference of where they're in the sequence. There is absolutely no difference at all of importance between study and practice. And so Gampopa said this is, beginners should study hard. And so in beginners first study, those they're just beginning to enter the Dharma. It is really important for them to engage in listening and contemplating in order to realize what they haven't known, to learn what they did not know. And once you've learned something, once you've really incorporated it in your mind, once you've gained the understanding, then when it becomes stable, then what you need to do is, once you gain stability, practice hard. This is what Gampopa said. Likewise, Jusen Khenpo said something similar. He said, prajna is extremely important. But prajna of just anything at all won't do, where you study anything at all, that's not. The prajna where you study whatever all is not effective. What you need for prajna is with the prajna of listening, you need to be able to recognize the afflictions. With the prajna of contemplation, you must be able to suppress the afflictions. And with the prajna of meditation, you must be able to eradicate the afflictions. If you prajna doesn't mean that you're just studying whatever going on, and it's not beneficial to just become clever. And so, with this view, Dorje also had the idea that people who enter the Kagyu teachers first study properly the text of Sutra and Tantra in order to establish the right view. And then in the end, you had to meditate on the meaning that they had studied in isolated places, on caves and mountains and so forth, in order to gain experience. He had them follow the traditions of the Kagyu Fourthers, just as a child must have their inheritance of the friends. In other words, you have to the study and practice together. And so that is, I think, the vast intention that he had in mind. And so that is, I think, how Mikyu Dorje thought about establishing monastic colleges. Now, the other part is how it is seen by other schools. I think there are many different things that, just to give a few examples of it, I'd like to talk about how Tsachen Losal Gyatso described it in one of his life, a story of his life. So there's a little bit in his life story about how Tsachen Losal Gyatso thought about Mikyu Dorje's activity of establishing monastic colleges. But first we need to understand who Tsachen Losal Gyatso was. Now, within the Sakya, there are three different parts. There are the Ngor, Dzong, and Tsar traditions. See, there's the most important upholders of the Sakya tradition. And among them, he was the source for the Tsar tradition of the Sakya. He was a disciple of Dorjen Kumpangpa. And he was a great being. He was being a great scholar and a practitioner. And but in terms of in comparison to being a sculptor, he acted more like a siddha than a scholar. Now, he initially entered the Gelugpa monastery, Tashik Lumpo, and he took his novice vows from the second Dalai Lama, Khenpo Gyatso. And the name Losal Gyatso was, in fact, given by the second Dalai Lama. But later, he injured his leg, and in order to heal his leg, he went to Khenpo Gyatso's Sakyapat Lama. So Khenpo Gyatso told him to go and see him, to Dorjen Kumpangpa. And when he got to Dorjen Kumpangpa, he felt very great faith in Dorjen Kumpangpa, and he became a Sakyapa. Now, among the Sakyapas, there were three who learned in sutras, three who landed in the tantras, and three who landed in both, as they say. And so in the sutras, there's Yakshun and Rongtongpa, and Ngordzong Tsasun, and then in both were Gorampa Shakya Choten and Taplung. So among the three who are learned in tantras, one of them is the Tsachen Losal Gyatso. He's not just an ordinary person, as we need to understand. He studied Dharma with many different teachings, including Kama Trinlepa. And he had two great disciples who were like the sun and moon. One of them was Khyentse Wangchuk, the other was Manto Ludrup Gyatso. Later, during the time of the third Dalai Lama, Gyaltsen Jomsenem, the third Dalai Lama also studied with him. And the fifth Dalai Lama also studied from the lineage of his disciples. Not only did he study from that, the fifth Dalai Lama also wrote a biography of Tsachen. Now, I don't need to say too much about this, but what it says in its own autobiography is that when he came to the Kyetel in Daeyu, so this is a place where there's a great monastic college. And it's at the same time that Mikyo Dorje arrived. And so this is during it's like this play, the Shu Nimo. And he came to the area of Shu, At the same time when they got there, so the people there were subjects of the Lord of Rinpong. The Lord of Rinpong said that we all have to welcome him. And he said this to all of his ministers and subjects. And when he said that, then all the lords and teachers of Jeyu, they were probably the subjects of Lord of Rinpong. They made really grand preparations. The Karmapa was coming, and so there was a lot of commotion, and they were also kind of happy. They're very excited as they prepared. But Losel Gyatso himself thought, we don't have much of a connection. Why is there reason to have such faith, and why do I have such excitement? I mean, this is the way he thought. And he met many people, and everyone he met, and everyone said, have you seen the Karmapa? Have you met the Karmapa? And he said, the Karmapa is probably some great being. He probably is. There's a danger that he is. I said that's word actually. It's so likely that he was a great being. But from what I've heard from other beings, from what I think, the Karmapa originally where it comes from is from the Gampopa's three main students, the three men from Kam. It's probably Dusum Khenpo or Kampa Use. And so what their appropriate the work that's appropriate for them is what they really should be doing is like to serve the transmission, the practice lineage that just ended from the instructions of the Indian masters Naropa and Maitripa and the Tibetans of Karmapa and Milarepa. And there's this practice lineage. That's what they primarily should do. But these days he doesn't do that. It's like leaving the stupa that needs it black and painting the rock that doesn't white. What this is saying? So actually, you've got a stupa, and you need to whitewash or paint this. So actually, what you need to whitewash is the stupa. But instead, you forget about the sutra. Let it stay black, and instead, then you put the whitewash on a cliff. Then there's no point. You're not doing where you should do it. You're doing it where you don't need to do it. And sort of not whitewashing the stupa that needs it, but instead of whitewashing the cliff. And he's saying doing things that he's doing things he doesn't need to do, and he's probably he can't compete with the Saikas and Gelugpas, but it seems like he's trying to. Studying in the philosophy, studying grammar and poetry, and teaching the tantras and so forth. It's like there's not a whole lot of point to his teachings. They're not really very good. There's not a value to them. But there's a lot of these teachings. But in actuality, they aren't really very good. They're saying all these strange things. Likewise, some of what I've heard is that he has a lot of relations with worldly ministers and officials and does a lot of actions that increase the 8 concerns. This is I've heard. And likewise, he disregards the gurus of his lineage and their scriptures. He disregards the texts that they've written. What he's talking about, he said, what he's probably talking about, how Mikyo Dorje gave up on the Shenton scripts, and he practiced primarily the self-empty, the wrong-tone views. And so in saying he's not teaching holding the teachings of this kind of cities. Like Mikyo Dorje is criticizing the ones that are a little bit better among the Karma Kachin. He's criticizing them. And likewise, there are all the lamas and chulkus who uphold the best attendance, and he takes them, all of these people, along with themselves. And so, for this reason, Mikyo Dorje He said, I don't, from the bottom of my heart, I feel no faith for Mikyo Dorje, he said. That's the main point. But in any case, what he's saying is that Mikyo Dorje is, what he should be doing is the teaching the practice, but he doesn't do that. And instead he does things he doesn't need to, like founding Shedras and so forth. And he's saying, and Sajjan Losel Gyatso is saying that he doesn't feel any respect for this. But the way I think about it, to think of my own opinion, I've already talked about what Mikyo Dorje is on thought. But when I think about my opinion, why Mikyo Dorje took such interest in study, I'm thinking about it from many different angles. At that time, there are the many Sakyavan and Galig philosophical scholars. But I don't think that he was trying to compete with them or to imitate them. I don't think that he was doing it in a way that wasn't independent. I think that's probably not how it was. Now, the reason why I don't think it was is that from one perspective, during the time the Kagyu for this, they really focused single-mindedly on practice. There were quite a few who had the karmic fortune to strive single-mindedly at practice. But later, within the Kagyu and other schools, there were, as the teachers gradually deteriorated, the people who had that karmic fortune and the faith and the progeny to be able to do that became fewer and fewer. And so there are fewer people who were striving single-mindedly at practice. Now, another situation is that within the Kagyu or within other schools, there are many people who had many misapprehensions or misconceptions or doubts about the Kagyu Dharma and the Kagyu lineage. So they're affected by these different doubts, and so for this reason, it was extremely important to increase the education about the Dharma in general and in the Kagyu in particular, whether you're talking about within the Kagyu itself or the way it's seen by the other members of other lineages. Increasing the education and the understanding of the Kagyu as it is was very important. Now, if we look at it from another angle, what we can understand from another perspective is that if we look at that for Mikyo Dorje to spread the teachings of study was actually different than others. The reason why it's different than others, that if we look at the works of Mikyo Dorje, there are many stories of he really valued the works of Kadampa masters such as Poto's Blue Notebook, the long soliloquy. There are the writings of the early Kadampa masters, Marpa, Mila, Gampa, Patmo, Drupa, Shang Tsalpa, and others. And so the early Kadampa masters and the early Kagyu masters, he considered these really important. And he engaged in listening, contemplation, study, and teaching of them at a great degree. He also wrote many different commentaries. And when he was talking about Sutra and Tantra, he always emphasized the view of the Kagyu forefathers. In particular, there is the single intent treatise of the Drikun Chikchen Sumrika. He called this the great philosophical school of the Dapo Kagyu. And during his own life, Mikyo Dorje studied and taught it frequently. So within Mikyo Dorje's conductors, there are 4 volumes on just the single intent alone. So for these reasons, we can see that for Mikyo Dorje to spread the teachings of study was not merely an imitation of other lineages, and certainly not to compete with other lineages. In order to compete, you have to have one of the reasons why I think that he wasn't competing is that, as it said in Tasi Chandra Johnson said in his last Tibetan, when he talked about the purpose of establishing the monastery in Setang, what he said at that point is that in the past, during the time of District Patmo Drukpa, was both a scholar and achieved accomplishment. But in later times, our great man-eaters didn't emphasize studies at all. And so for this, everyone started criticizing them as stupid, ignorant imitators who know nothing. Everyone was disparaging them. And so for this reason, the Dharma was not effective Dharma and the people were not effective people. This is a fault that happened. And so for this reason, I established the Setang Center. So this is what he said. And so if the Kajus don't study, then for one perspective, the Kajubas don't know their own selves. This is one situation that occurs. And another aspect is that other people will criticize them. They criticize them. They say these are people who don't know anything. They're staying up in the mountain, looking marmots in the mountains, who spend 4 or 5 months hibernating in the winter, just sleeping for 5 or 5 months. And so the Kaju methods stay in the mountains, but they don't know anything at all, people would say, criticizing them heavily. So it's like there's a point when you had no choice but to do a bit of study. There's no choice but to engage in teaching and teaching. And so it's like I think it's just that they had come to a point where they had to do it. It's not a question of anyone trying to compete. And that's one point. Now, from another perspective, when you don't teach the special views of the Vajrabhaktas, and if there's like a bit of notebook that you kind of put, if you leave these teachings in like notebooks and just leave them next to your pillow, you need to be able to explain them as they accord the words of the Buddha, as in the intent of the great scriptures. If you can teach them in this way, then they become like a great contribution to Buddhism in general. And they become something that can become a way down the path of general Buddhism. And it becomes something where you're able to speak with others and actually engage in discussions with others. If you're unable to explain about how they accord with the words of the Buddha and the intent of the great scriptures, then you may say that they're wonderful pith instructions, but other people aren't going to understand them. And so this is when this occurred, then it gave a lot of difficulties. And so for this reason, Mikyo Dorje, when he taught, didn't just establish a methodology to say, oh, you should teach the text. He instead emphasized the views of the Kagyu forefathers. He showed how he explained them in ways that they fit with the Buddha's words and the meaning of the great treatises. And this was a great contribution. It's like if we think about it in the present day, Mikyo Dorje's works are considered really important and really sacred. And this is becoming even more and more clear. These days, we have in the Kamar Kagyu, we have the fact that we have texts on the 8 great texts we can study and boast of to others. And now because of the 7th Karmapa and 8th Karmapa and also Drupa Pema Karpas, there's not anything else. And if Drupa Pema Karpa hadn't written it, if 8th Karmapa hadn't written his commentaries on the great texts, then these days, even if we established a Shedra, we wouldn't have a text to study. You have to have like a basis before you can study. You have to have you have your own tradition. We'd have that difficulty. Those over a couple of centuries. It's been a couple of centuries, and only now are we beginning to really see the incredible benefit that Mikyo Dorje had, and we're going to take interest in this. For example, in the 1990s, the 16th Karmapa had reprinted the text of Mikyo Dorje. They hadn't been in Tibet before. They came from India into Tibet, and when they arrived, and there the Kagyu, there are a few scholars who studied in the Kagyu tradition, not so many, but there were a few, and they were just delighted. They were absolutely delighted. They felt like it really had a great effect on their minds. It was really, really influential. Then the people from their other lineages were amazed too, saying, "Is it possible that you Kagyu have texts like that?" It is possible. You do have them. They're like just completely amazed. So many Khenpos have said that to me. And it's understandable. And the reason that for a couple or 3 centuries, the Kagyu Shedras had been torn down, the transmission, the teaching from the great text was lost. Later in Kham, monastic colleges were established in Palpung and Surmang. They were established, but they taught like the 13 great texts. They just have on that, but they were unable to study or teach the great texts of the 7th or the 8th Karmapas to any great degree. And because of this, then forget about other schools, even within the Kagyu followers of the Kagyu, didn't know that we had some commentaries on the 5 great texts. They just really didn't know that we had such great commentaries on them. And so like there's no, we can't blame ourselves or others. In any case, it's as Sachin Losar Gyasa said, this is just like that's just like an illustration. And there are many other examples of that. People thought that these Kajipas are because of the, I think it's because of the karma of the Kajus. And because from one perspective, when Kajipas had studied philosophy and then people say, oh, you're competing with the Sakya and Gelug. You're not taking your responsibility as a prosecutors lineage. You're doing all sorts of things. And so they criticize the Kajus. But if you don't study it, then what they say is oh, those Kajipas and Mahamadars are like idiot meditators. They're like marmots who live in the mountain. And they criticize them. So whether the Kajus do, whether they study or whether they're not, they're only criticized. And this is, I think, the karma of the Kagyu lineage. There's really nothing that can be done about it. In any case, during his lifetime, Mikyu Dorje founded many monastic colleges for both sutra and tantras, as I mentioned the other day. So among them, what I'd like to speak about today is I'd like to talk about the Gatsukama Shunling Monastic College. But I think I first need to take a little bit of a break. So we're going to take a 20-minute break. Thank you. Now, next, I'd like to speak a little bit about the origins of the Gatsukama Shunling. Mikyu Dorje had founded many monastic colleges and tantric colleges and so forth. Among them, I'd just speak as like a representative of how he founded the Gatsukama Shunling. Now, when I speak about this, in order to make this easy, I've made it into 10 different points. And the first is how he initially founded the Shedra. Now, regarding how he initially founded the Shedra, both the Feast scholars, Patpao Dzogchen and the Golden Rosary of the College, say that it was founded in the Water Dragon year. And so this was in 1532, in the 10th Tibetan month, when Mikyu Dorje and the great encampment were staying at Tsalkung in Kongpo. And while they were staying there, there are 10 monks from the Nyingla Leksheling. And this is what I mentioned before, the first Karma Constant Shedra, or the Karma Constant Shedra that was founded by Karma Tlimpa. And so among them, there are Rinchen Lingpa and Abjamta Sangha Yeshe. So there are these 10 different 10 different scholars who are invited for the from that. They were like the foundation, and then in addition to that, Mikyu Dorje had also many scholars who were in his entourage who were studying, including Ngare Rabjampa, Chokman Lempa, Kampa Rabja Sengye Sampo, Gugi Rabjampa Deden, and so forth. In this way, there were adding several different scholars, and then in Jeddah they had around over 20 scholars. These are like the basis. And these 20-odd scholars and Rabjampas were like the foundation for creating a monastic college within the great encampment called the Karma Ling. As I said before, the Karma was like where you're going in the encampment. It's like when you have a lot of tents, right? This is an encampment. And so they'd go from different places, and they travel in different places. They didn't stay permanently in any single location. And so the Karma Ling monastic college also went with the great encampment. So the great encampment was like the mother, and then the and so this and so the and so then there were like the secondary parts of it. They're like the Shamars encampment and the Shamars and the Gyaltsab encampment and so forth. So these are like separate encampments that traveled with the main encampment. At that time, when they were initially founding the Karma Ling Monastic College, the main teacher is not exactly written. It's not claiming, but as it probably it's probably one of the first different among the 10 different scholars invited from Nyingma Rinpoche Ling. It's probably the Rinchen Lekpa. And so probably, if we look at this, probably the first Khenchen Likpa was probably the first main teacher at the Karma Rinpoche Ling. So some people do say this. So Khenpo Rinchen Likpa later went to Kham, and he founded a monastic college at Ratin Ganden Ling in Minyak. And there he taught the 5 great texts. Ratin Ganden Ling is still there these days. It is in Minyak. These days, I've seen a short history of it, and what it says in that history is that later, Mongol army came and destroyed the Ratin Ganden Ling monastic college. And then after that, it became like a Nyingma monastery. In any case, Khenpo Rinchen Lingpa was among the many Rabjampas who were Mikidorji's great direct disciples. He was the one who did the most for the teachings and beings. So that is my discussion of the initial founding of the Karma Shidap Ling. The second part is how Pao Tsultreng was 10 years the Acharya of the Shedra. Now, in 1533, in the water stag year, in the 9th Tibetan month, the Karmapa Mikyo Dorje gave Pao Tsultreng a statue of himself, Mikyo Dorje, that was made of precious materials, a manuscript that Mikyo Dorje had written himself of his own handwritten manuscript of the great Vinaya commentary that he had written, and also like a silk embroidered lion cushion, the type of silk. And so there was an embroidery of the lion on this. And so there are these 3 causes, these 3 presents. And he gave him these 3 presents and said to Pao Tsultreng, because of the connections from your previous aspirations, the Mikyo Dorje then appointed Pao Tsultreng as the teaching acharya for the Karma Ling. And this is described in Pao Tsultreng's own biography, The Mirror for Reflecting the Confused Face. This is where it's clearly described in that. And from then on, until 1537, in any case, for the period of 5 years, Pao Tsultreng was the teaching acharya of Karma Shunla Ling. And he taught the 5 great texts of middle way, Prajnapada, Vinaya, the Dharma, as well as the profound inner meaning, Hevajra, and the sublime continue, as well as grammar and others sciences. And he helped develop many scholars who could teach the infant sutras and tantras. And so this is the topic of Paul being the teaching acharya of the Shedra. Now the third point is, after Paul Trungwa, Ngari Ramcha Cholang Likpa was the acharya. This is about the period of his tenure. So Ngari Ramjamba Cholang Likpa, he became the acharya in the second month of 1537, when Mikyo Dorje and encampment were staying at Jikung at Lungshu Tachitang. At that time, Paul Trengwa had spent 5 years as the acharya, and he went to Mikyo Dorje and he resigned, and his resignation was accepted. And then Mikyo Dorje then thought about which scholar from among the monastery he should appoint. And when he thought about that, among all the many different schools, he thought that Ngari Rabjanta Cholang Lempa was the best, and he decided to invite him as the acharya of the Karma Shungut Ling. Then in 1538, Mikyo Dorje and the encampment went from the Tsurpo monastery, where they spent Losar, Tibetan New Year at Tsurpo, and then they went to Nyukla. They came to Nyukla Lekshe Ling. And so they came to this place called Nyukla. Well, there was already a Shedra at Nyukla Lekshe Ling. And then there was also the new Shedra, the Karma Shunla Ling. So you had the Rabjampas of Karma Shunla Ling and also the scholars from Karma Shunla Ling, and he said that they should hold a symposium to finer points of the 5 great texts. He said that they have to hold the symposium, he said. So while Mikyo Dorje was staying at Nyukla Lekshe Ling, the Garchen Monastic College, or the encampment Muslim College, Karma Shunla Ling and Nyukla Lekshe Ling, had a conference, a discussion between the two of them. And this was, Mikyo Dorje was very happy about this. And so they had a lot of programs, including teaching and debate. Then in 1539, Mikyo Dorje and the encampment were staying at Shiga Rinpoche. So they went to Shiga Rinpoche, and at that time, Mikyo Dorje gave the Shedra, the monastic college of the encampment, teachings on his own commentary of the Prajnaparamita, the rest-free yogis. Likewise, at that time, in the Tibetan grammar, there's one famous scholar named Pelkang Losao. Pelkang Losao also came to the Karma Garchen Great Encampment, and he taught the Kalapa grammar, the composition and poetry, and he taught a lot about grammar and terminology. And so he taught these topics of knowledge. So at that time, during that time, it was primarily Pelkang Losao who taught grammar and the other topics of knowledge at the Karma Shunla Ling. Likewise, within the Karma Shunla Ling, there were, if you wonder how did they develop their students into scholars? To give an example, in 1540, After the Tibetan New Year, there was the Munam that was held at Lhasa. And after that, there was the Lord of Topgyawa. At that time in Tibet, there are many lords or depas in Tibetan. And so you'd call the lords of each region, they'd be called depa or Topgyawa. And the Depa Topgyawa's brother went forth and was ordained by Mikhet Dorje, and he was given the name Kamadana Yandak Pa. And then he studied at Kama Shunluk Ling. This is where he studied philosophy, Kama Shunluk Ling. And then he completed his education there. And then later he returned to his homeland. And he went to Topgyal in Sang and founded the Topgyal Karma Vinaya Center at Vinaya College. And so this is one of the several monastic colleges that Karmapa founded. And the one who did the founding was the brother of the Lord of Topgyawa, studied at Karma Shunluk Ling, and then he went back and he founded the Topgyal Karma Duoling. And through his scholarly activity, it really helped the Kaji teachings flourish. He really served the teachings greatly. So at that time, Lord Topgyawa was one of the more high-status individuals in the area of central Tibet. He entered the Karma Shunluk Ling monastery and completed his monastic training and education. So this is just an example. Then after that, Mikhet Dorje and the Karmapa were invented by the Lord of Rinpoche to the area of Tsang. They asked him, please, it's been 3 years. But Mikhet Dorje didn't accept that, and Mikhet Dorje did as he said. He preferred staying in remote places. Since he liked remote places, he said, I'm not going to come to Tsang, he said. So he didn't accept the invitation. But at that time, even though he was unable to go to Tsang, Mikhet Dorje always so focused on the Kama Shunluk Shing and studying it, and so the Lord thought that he would give some service. So the Lord of Rinpoche then offered many monks. They have offered many monks, but the monks that the Lord of Rinpoche offered, but there were only a few who were able to study well and become able to uphold the scriptures. There are just a few of them, most of them, not many at all. Likewise, Mikhet Dorje, from time to time, would teach the middle way, or to teach the bodhicitta according to the relative bodhicitta according to the teacher's tradition. And he'd often teach the single intent. And when he did this, then all the people in the Kama Shunluk, because they were part of the great encampment, they would also have the opportunity to receive many teachings from Mikhet Dorje, I believe. And so Kama Shunluk Ling had like the particular transmission of Mikhet Dorje's explanations. And so in this way, the students of Kama Shunluk Ling had many opportunities that others did not. Next, I'd like to think about how we're on the fourth point. The monastic college settling permanently at Lumpur Gang in Yarta. And what this is about is, in 1543, during the spring, Mikhet Dorje and the encampment were entertained by the Lord Phadpupa Chempa, who invited them to Lumpur Gang in Yarta. Now, at that time, the Lord Hlabukpa. Before the Karmapa had arrived, had found like an even place, not a place with a knot of uneven ground, but a firm place. And he planted various trees there. And he built a little Naga shrine. What a Naga shrine means is, I'll talk about that later. And he built it's like a little garden, basically. And then he erected a pillar there. And on the side of that, he wrote the Gatsal Dharma Palace. He carved these letters there. And his hope was that in the future, this could be a monastery for the Karmapa. And he thought this was like an auspicious connection for this, and he wrote the Gatsal Dharma Palace on this pillar. And so Mikyu Dorje and the lamas from the encampment and all the Rinpoches all gathered, and they consecrated the ground. They did all the ceremonies to examine, ask for, and bless the ground. And then they laid the foundation of a temple. And then the encampment's monastic college, Karma Shanklin, settled there permanently. So before that, the college went where the encampment bid. It didn't have any particular permanent place. There was no particular shed or monastic college. But from that time on, the king Hlabu Chen offered it, and this place in Yarta, and then it became the permanent location for the Gatsal Shungling. So this is in the area of Yartu. It's the upper part of the Yarlung Valley. In particular, the Lord had named this place Karmadasa Palace, and so because of this, the name of this monastic college was called Yarta Gatsal Karma Shunglukling. Was the name of it. So Gatsal was given because of this. Yarta is because there's an upper tu. It's in the upper part of the Yarlung Valley. So Yarta and Gatsal. When they built the garden, the Lord himself had carved in the pillar Gatsal Dhamma Palace, so they continued to use that name, and then they add the Karma Shunglukling. That's the name that it had already had. And so you compiled it all together. It's called Yarta Gatsal Karma Shunglukling, or the Gatsal Karma Shunglukling. The fifth part is the area of Yarta Hlabung Bagang and Hlabuk Pachen. When you talk about Hlumbogang and Yarta, in Tibet there's a really well-known mountain called Yama Shumpo. And so there's a valley that flows down from that. It's called the Yarlung Valley. And there are three parts of it. There's the upper, the middle, and the part. The upper part is called the Tu, or the upper part is Yartu. And the specific place is called Hlumbogang. Now, with the palace of the lord of that area is called the Samde Dejenze, and when it's about it, it's called Samde. Sometimes it's called the Hlabu Bachen, sometimes it's called Samde. Now, the family of that lord, the reason why it's called Hlabu Bachen, the reason it's called Hla, is because his family was part of the line of Tibetan Almarism, like the Dharma Udam Tsen, whom we call Langdharma in the Kadrism. So he had two sons, Udum and Tsen, and Wisung. And so his family comes, and there are two ways it's explained. One is that it comes from the Hlabu Bachen. It says that his family comes from Wisung. So it's one way it's said. And the Du Dharma history it comes from his mother Ten. It translates from Yembe. So that's where the the family comes from. There are two different accounts, and so they need to be examined. Now, in any case, there's this Naga temple, Naga shrine, as I said. The old days, people, the lords, and the important people would often would have gardens where they'd enjoy themselves. In the middle, they have like a little bit of a, like have a little pond, pool or pond, referring to bed. And for example, in Lhasa, there's a Dzongkap Phugang. That's a similar to that. There's a garden, and then you have a man-made pool. It's kind of a nice kind of place to talk about it. It's kind of like just a little a pleasant place to go or park. And so there's a bit of so these parks are like the nicest and the best places. You'd see them as the place where you park, right? It's a really beautiful and attractive place. And there are a lot of different trees, and there is also some water there. And so it seems like there's some sort of a pond or pool. There's a really nice, attractive place that the Karmapa was built that he offered to the Karmapa to build the monastic college. Now, the sixth is the rules and regulations of the Gatsal Shungling. Now, in terms of the charter, the rules and regulations for this, before the Shedra or the monastic college was settled permanently in Yartu, while it was still part of the encampment, Mikyu Dorje wrote a charter with the rules and regulations for the Monakas. And what it's called is the temporary charter for the Gatsal Karma Shunluk Ling when it was initially part of the encampment. So if you look at the title, it is written during the time when the monastic college was still part of the encampment before it settled in Gatsal. And since it's temporary, that after they settled at Gatsal Ling, then that Mikyu Dorje must have given a more detailed charter and rules and regulations. So this is what I think that tells us. Now we've come to the seventh point, and this is the consecration of the temple for the monastic college. In 1540, or in the end of the 9th month, at the beginning of the 10th month, Mikyu Dorje and the encampment came once again to Yartu Namgyal Gang. And so I think that the temple and everything had been completely built. And so at that time, Mikyu Dorje and all the monastics in the encampment, he gave teachings to them. They had many discussions on the teachings, and they had discussions on the different discussions on the difficult points. And so there was a lot of similar such activities at that time. I think they also did. I think they did the consecration at that time as well. The next point is how he the printing the wood block obligations. Now, this is around the year 1553. The Karmapa Mikyu Dorje asked Pausula Trengwa to prepare to print many editions of the philosophical texts at Gatsal Karma Shunluk. These would include the third Karmapa's Auto Commentary, the Profounded in Meaning, seventh Karmapa's Ocean of Literature on Logic, and Mikyu Dorje's Kritika on Prajnapada, the Rest for Yogas, and so forth, among many other texts. And so this is the instruction that Mikyu Dorje gave. And likewise, it also seems that the commentary on the Vinaya Sutra's root text was also written there. There's a copy of this is in the Potala library, and what we can tell from this is that they must have carved many woodblocks for printing. They carved the woodblocks and printed many texts, and among them, now the woodblocks are no longer there, but some of the old texts, the old editions, are probably still extant. Among them, one of them is the commentary on the Vinaya Sutras, and there is several such works like that. Now, after Mikyu Dorje passed away, his regent was a Shama Kuntra Yenlag, and his student was 9th Karmapa Wonchunda, his student was Shama Kuntra Wonchunda, and his student was the 10th Karmapa Chuyin Dorje. And during their time, I don't need to speak about how the monastic college was administered during their time and how it flourished, because we don't have enough time today. Now at the ninth, actually the ninth, I'm not sure if I should, I don't need to speak about the ninth and how the end of it. So we don't need to speak about that. Then in place of that, we'll think about the ninth, the 10th, and because of the ninth, the reconstruction of the Ganden Chusam Ling. And so what this is speaking about is that we have the Ganden Chusam Daiji Ling monastery, which is also in Yarte. And this was in 1651, in the 11th month, the 5th Dalai Lama came to Yarlung. And at that same time, they established the Ganden Chusam Ling monastic college at that time. At that time, during the 50th, there are 13 among the 13 great monasteries he established, and this is one of them. In the present day, it's upon the southern part of the present day autonomous religion in the region of Neodong in Yartu Yutso in the Chudegong city. And the Ganden Chusam Daiji Ling is actually one of the larger Gelug monasteries in the southern areas. Now, when Gen Tupten and others did the research, they went to this monastery and they spoke with the monks there. When they asked them, asking the monks about the history of the monastery, they said that it was founded in the 11th century by Rolotso Dorje. He founded the monastery there. There's this one account. And there is also an account that is founded in the 17th century by the 5th Dalai Lama. They don't have any other anything else to say, but they had some suspicions that it had previously been a Kagyu monastery, and so because of that, then they looked to see what evidence there was that it had previously been a Kagyu monastery, and the evidence they found is that on the second story of the temple, there is a Mahakala shrine, and within the Mahakala shrine, within the text they recite, there is the 8th Karmapa's short Torma offering, the Madakma, the Madana Chitombarchang. So there's that. That text is there. Likewise, the Kamsa and general offering to the Dakinis. For example, in the general term of the Dakinis, there's a whole it says Dolang the Sub, Dolaji Chiwara, Chumotashin Sermon, sisters, Glow Dakla in the East, Tolang, Surbu, and so forth. It basically listing all of the names of all the Kagyu practice sites and monasteries, but they didn't really pay much attention to that. And so they had really nothing to say about that. However, what they said is that before the Cultural Revolution, within the shrine hall, there was an old Vajradhara, and there was said that it was from the past when it was a Karma Kagyu monastery. But the old Vajradhara statue was destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. What I said before about the Gaza Kamashula thing is primarily based on the research by Gen Timpton Weiser, which he put a lot of effort into. So next, what I'd like to speak about. You wonder, well, what is the connection between Gadan Chisholm Daje Ling and the Gaza Shiluk Ling? Well, how do you know there's a connection? I say there is a connection. But the connection is that the connection is that the fifth Dalai Lama wrote an biography called The Fine Duclo Cloth, in which he says, in the Iron Hair year, the rings of the Kamsan was transferred to Ganden Chisholm Daje Ling. What this is saying, in the Iron Hair year, there was the Karma constant. So there are two ways as it is. When you talk about the ruins of the Karma Kamsang, in the past had been the Karma Kajit. Later, the Karma Kajit had been destroyed, and then later it was built at. So this is when they built on the ruins, the Karma Kamsang. Another way of saying it. Another is the. So there's a there are Karma Kajit monks as well. But even though it was destroyed, but they were then after that it became the. So this is like a conversion of the monastery. Things like this we're talking about, like they had the seeds with the Kamajit, and so the translate that there were not even a Kamajit, there was just a monastery. There were no individuals; it's just a temple. So when it says here the ruins of the Karma Constant, the Ganden Chisholm Daje Ling, what this is saying is that the Karma Daje Ling was in the ruins of where there had been previously been a Karma Constant monastery. And so when this was in 1651. And so at that time, the fifth Dalai Lama went to Yarlung, and on the time that he was there, they founded Chisholm Daje Ling. And this gives the same dates are given in other texts as well. That Karma Constant the old Karma Kachimasta just shows that it's a Kamsa monster, but how do we know that this is Gaza Shumlut Ling? This is also in the same volume of the Fine Dalai Lama. It says that the Karmic monsters in the Iron Bird year that had previously, but the ruins of Gatsa and Yatra, the old temple and the areas given to the Galut tradition, including the temple, the shrine hall, the Ladang, the king kitchen in the east, and the surrounding Dharma entities. What this means is that this is probably in the 1656. At that time, the Chisholm Daje Ling had been built. After it had been built, there are many lands for the surrounding fields for this to provide for the Sangha that had been given to the Gaza Ling, and they were all transferred to the Chisholm Daje Ling. And likewise, he built a new temple and a new kitchen and new monasteries, he said. And so for this reason, in Yatur, there was the Ganden Chisholm Daje Ling. And this was previously the Gaza Shumlut Ling that had previously been founded by Mikhail Dorje. I think this is clear that. And so I think that's basically all I have to say. And so the main point here is that during the time of Karmapa Mikhail Dorje, he founded many monastic colleges in Sutra and Tantra, but but not one of this monasteries remains, right? And they are unable, there are no places where they could continue to uphold the Karmakaja traditions. And if we look at this, we see that, in particular with our Karmakaja and the Karma Council, we have now founded many monastic colleges. This is actually very rare, and they're very important. And so when we think about it, in the past, there were many different monastic colleges, but none of them remain. And so now, within our Karma Center, we have these monastic colleges, and within them, we are studying texts that we haven't been able to study for many centuries, whether those written by Mikhail Dorje or by the seventh Karmapa Chodachasa or by the third Karmapa Ranjan Dorje or by other Karmakaji masters. And so in terms of the texts, in the past, the texts were very rare, but now they're very frequent. And so, and in terms of the fascinated, so if not, certainly not worse than before, if not better. And if we have this good opportunity now, since we have this good opportunity, when we look back at the situation from the past, see that during the past, during the time of 7th and 8th Karmapas, the study of the teaching in Sutra and Tantra spread, the teaching of philosophy flourished. But it's like this, just something that's written in the histories. The continuum of that, the nothing is remaining of the continuum of that. And so for that reason, for us to have this opportunity and these facilities is really sacred and important in a way that isn't for others. Just naturally becomes like that. And so for this reason, I'd like to ask all of you to think of this in this way. Just as Mikhail Dorje himself thought about it. We need to have both the teachings of practice and studio. Of course, we are a transition of practice, but it's not easy to do practice. You need a faith, diligence, and prajna. In faith, you have to have the faith that borns from knowing. You have the prajna that does the profound points of the instructions. And you need to have the diligence that realizes the point, the diligence that is able to really practice out. It's difficult to get. I think it's very difficult to have the teachings of teaching practice, studying practice as we did before, but I think to a certain degree, there's still a little bit of the tradition of it. And so in addition to that, what we also need in addition is to say that we're the proselytship, but if we don't take any interest in listening and contemplating, then from one perspective, then it's not okay for us to have to divorce the studying practice is not okay. And then the other point is that the other lineages will say that those Kajabas don't know anything. They're idiot meditors. They'll criticize us for it. And so in their perspective, there are many different reasons and purposes for us to have the monastic colleges. And so these shudders, we need to have the union of listening, contemplating, meditation. We have the practice lineage from before, and taking that as the basis, then before that, we listen to the text, and then we need to be able to incorporate that into our being. And then, as I said before, there are the pith instructions of the Kajamasa. We need to explain them in a way that matches the words of the Buddha and the philosophical texts of the past. It is important for us to be able to do this. Only when we can do that can we walk forward with the other traditional lineages and with other Buddhists. We just say, I'm great, we have these incredible instructions, I think, that no one could answer, that no one could possibly understand it. They don't even need to understand them. And if we stay in some remote place just saying that, then what's going to happen? eventually you're just going to deteriorate. There's no way that you're going to improve. There's just no way that you can improve. And so I think for this reason, I think it's an important thing for everyone to understand. So that's, I think, for now. So a little bit colder. It's not going to be easy for me to recite. So now, if you all recite the text, so you all recite these texts. The Tara. Please all recite Tara. So first of all, we recite the normal dedication prayers.